In a world where injustice can sometimes feel overwhelming, there are moments when a single phone call can shift the tide. This is the story of two twin black girls who were denied boarding by an airline simply because of their race. But what seemed like an unfortunate setback quickly turned into an unexpected battle when their father, a powerful CEO, made a phone call that no one could ignore. What followed was an intense series of events that would challenge the very core of airline policies. It was supposed to be a regular day for the twin sisters, preparing for their long-awaited vacation. But as they arrived at the airport, something felt off. The staff was unusually cold, the check-in process took longer than expected, and soon, they found themselves being told they couldn't board the flight. No explanation, just a harsh no. Confused and shocked, the girls tried to reason with the staff, but their pleas were met with indifference. The twins were devastated, but little did they. The twins stood in shock, struggling to understand what was happening. They tried explaining their tickets were valid, their names were on the list, yet they were still being denied boarding. The other passengers moved past them, oblivious to their growing frustration. It wasn't just about a missed flight anymore, it was about something much deeper. The girls knew they couldn't let this go unnoticed. They were determined to not let a simple mistake or unjust decision ruin their chance at adventure. With trembling fingers, the girl dialed the number they both knew by heart, the number of their father, the CEO. He had always been a figure of authority in their lives, someone who had always taught them to stand up for themselves. This time, however, it wasn't a simple family matter. This was personal. The moment their father answered the phone, the girl's voice cracked as she explained what had happened. The air around them seemed to freeze as the gravity of the situation settled in. "Don't worry." Back at his office, their father wasted no time. He immediately contacted the airline's top executives, demanding answers. His position as CEO meant he was no stranger to making high-stakes decisions, but this was different. This wasn't just about business, this was about his daughters, his family. His voice, firm and authoritative, echoed through the phone lines as he demanded that the airline address the discrimination his daughters had faced. The executives on the other end were stunned by his. As their father's call echoed through the halls of the airline's headquarters, the twin sisters waited anxiously by the gate. Time seemed to stand still. Each passing minute felt like an eternity. They could feel the weight of their father's power pushing through the air, but the uncertainty was unbearable. Would the airline make things right, or would they try to bury the incident? Just when they thought the situation couldn't get any more intense, a new notification popped up on their phone. The announcement came minutes later, loudspeakers echoing through the terminal, the airline's decision now public. The flight had been cancelled, not because of a technical issue, but because of the immense pressure from their CEO father. The staff, who had once been dismissive, now stood frozen in disbelief as they saw the situation unfold. The twins felt a surge of relief mixed with disbelief. They hadn't just won, they had taken control of their own narrative. The airline had to answer for they. The entire airport seemed to pause as the announcement echoed through the terminal. Passengers looked at each other in disbelief. The twin sisters, standing together, exchanged glances, eyes wide, their hearts pounding. This was not how they had envisioned their day going. Yet, in that moment, they realized something more profound had just taken place. They had fought back against an unjust system, and they had won. As the airline staff scrambled to process the cancellation, the girls felt a queasy. The news of the cancelled flight spread quickly. Media outlets picked up the story, highlighting the shocking turn of events. The CEO's intervention had shaken not only the airline but the public as well. On social media, hashtags like #JusticeForTheTwins and #CEOPower began trending. People from all walks of life weighed in, expressing their support for the girls. They had become symbols of standing up against unfair treatment, and the ripple effect of their courage was felt far beyond that airp. Back at home, the girls sat in their living room, reflecting on the whirlwind that had just unfolded. It felt surreal, almost like a dream. Their father had always taught them that standing up for what was right was never easy, but it was always necessary. He had shown them that in moments of adversity, their voices mattered. As they processed everything that had happened, the twins realized that what had begun as a simple flight mishap had turned into an extraordinary lesson in justice, courage. As the days went on, the airline was forced to issue a public apology. They acknowledged their mistake and promised to review their policies to ensure that no one would ever be treated like the twin sisters had been. But the apology felt hollow compared to the overwhelming support the girls had received. What mattered most wasn't the airline's words, it was the fact that the twins had inspired a wave of change. For once, the powerless had become the powerful. They had taken back their dignity. The CEO father, while proud of his daughters, reminded them that the journey was far from over. Their fight had not been about a single incident, it was about making a statement that would resonate for years to come. The twins understood now that their actions had consequences far beyond their own lives. They had raised awareness about discrimination and shown how one phone call could start a revolution. The impact of that moment was still unfolding, and as they looked toward the future, As the days passed, the twins found themselves in the midst of a media frenzy. News outlets sought interviews, and social media flooded with messages of admiration and support. They had become faces of resilience, embodying the strength to stand against discrimination. But the attention also brought challenges. People who hadn't experienced what they had began to speak on their behalf, some offering advice and others offering critique. The twins realized that while they were grateful for the support, despite the overwhelming attention, the twins remained grounded. Their father, though busy with work, made sure to keep them centered. Stay focused on what matters most, he would remind them. This is about more than just what happened at the airport. It's about the conversation we're starting. The girls understood that their story had ignited something bigger, an open dialogue about the treatment of black travelers, especially in spaces that were supposed to be safe. They had sparked a movement. The decision to continue was never truly up for debate. The twins knew they had an opportunity to make a lasting impact. With their father's support, they partnered with advocacy groups to create awareness campaigns about racial discrimination in travel. They began speaking at schools and community centers, sharing their story and encouraging others to stand up for their rights. It wasn't easy, and the weight of being public figures started to take its toll. But each time they spoke, their activism began to gain momentum. What started as a phone call to their father had turned into a national movement. Airlines, once confident in their ability to get away with mistreatment, now faced increased scrutiny. Lawsuits were filed, and policy changes were discussed. The airline industry, and other sectors, began to realize that they could no longer ignore the stories of marginalized travelers. The twins had ignited a fire that couldn't be put out. With every meeting, every public AP. Through all the chaos and pressure, the twins remained united. Their bond had only grown stronger throughout this experience. The love and support of their father, along with the guidance of others in their community, kept them focused on their mission. They knew they were not alone in this fight, and that knowledge made them more powerful. What had begun as an unjust experience at an airport had evolved into something far greater, an opportunity to transform the world around them. And as the twins' influence grew, so did their awareness of the challenges ahead. The fight for justice wasn't as simple as winning one battle. It was about ensuring long-term change, especially in industries resistant to progress. One day, during a meeting with lawmakers, the twins were asked how they felt about the future of racial equality in the airline industry. With unwavering conviction, one of the sisters answered, "This isn't just about us, this is about everyone who's ever faced discrimination." The sisters were no longer just symbols of resistance, they had become thought leaders in the fight against inequality. Their story had gone viral not only because of the shocking nature of the event but because it represented the kind of systemic change that needed to happen everywhere. People reached out to them from all over the world, asking for advice, offering support, and sharing their own stories. The twins realized that their voices had become a beacon for others, and it was a role they. The airline, now under intense public pressure, started making changes. They held meetings with advocacy groups and even launched diversity training for their staff. The twins had taken it a step further by pushing for broader corporate reforms, something that hadn't been done in the airline industry before. In a historic move, the airline announced it would be working with the twins to create a new protocol for how they handled complaints of discrimination. This wasn't just a temporary fix, One day, while reflecting on how far they had come, the twins received a letter from an unexpected source, the CEO of another major airline. The letter was an apology for the mistreatment they had experienced, but it also included an invitation to meet and discuss how to improve the company's policies. The girls were overwhelmed by the gesture. They had never imagined that their story would reach so many, let alone inspire such a direct response from the industry. It was proof that they're activists. As the twins continued their advocacy, their father reminded them that their story was part of a much larger narrative, one of resilience, justice, and the power of standing together. Their journey had taught them more than just the importance of fighting for equality, it had shown them the incredible strength that came from having a clear purpose. They were no longer just victims of discrimination, they had become leaders in the fight for a better future. With each new chapter of their activism. As the twins' work continued, their platform expanded beyond just the airline industry. They started to receive invitations to speak at conferences, where they addressed issues like systemic racism, inequality, and the power of collective action. Their message was clear: change would only come if individuals and organizations took responsibility for their actions. They were no longer just the girls from that viral story, they were leaders in a global movement, and they had no intention of slowing. The media coverage around the twins had shifted. No longer was it just about a shocking incident at an airport, it was about the broader cultural change they had sparked. The twins found themselves interviewed by major news outlets, their story serving as a catalyst for discussions on how institutions needed to evolve. They shared their vision of a world where no one had to face discrimination, where people were treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their background. But despite the ATT, their father, a man who had always been strong in his convictions, began to take a more public role in their advocacy as well. He joined the twins in several of their meetings with airline executives, using his business acumen to push for real, lasting change. Together, the family formed a united front, demanding corporate accountability and fair treatment for all passengers. Their influence became undeniable. What started as a single incident had grown into a national and even international conv. Their father, a man who had always been strong in his convictions, began to take a more public role in their advocacy as well. He joined the twins in several of their meetings with airline executives, using his business acumen to push for real, lasting change. Together, the family formed a united front, demanding corporate accountability and fair treatment for all passengers. Their influence became undeniable. What started as a single incident had grown into a national and even international conv. As the twins continued their journey, they took a moment to reflect on everything they had accomplished. From the initial incident that had set everything in motion to the global movement they had helped create, they knew they had made an undeniable impact. But as they looked ahead, they also understood that their fight wasn't over. There was still much work to be done, and they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. With their voices united and their purpose clear, the twins were The twins began to notice the ripple effect their actions had created. More and more people started sharing their stories, telling of moments when they had experienced unfair treatment in various parts of their lives. Social media was flooded with messages from people who felt empowered by the twins' courage. The girls were no longer just symbols of resistance, they were symbols of hope, a reminder that change was possible, no matter how insurmountable the odds may seem. Their social media platform. The twins' story was starting to have more concrete effects as well. Several major corporations, inspired by their advocacy, began revising their diversity and inclusion policies. The airline industry, once at the center of their fight, now took steps to ensure that their staff underwent regular sensitivity training, with a focus on understanding the experiences of marginalized groups. The girls felt a sense of accomplishment, but they knew that systemic change didn't happen overnight. It was In an unexpected turn, the twins were invited to a global summit on racial equality, where they were asked to speak alongside other influential activists and leaders. As they stood before a large audience, their hearts raced, but this time, it was different. They were no longer just the girls who had faced discrimination at an airport, they were powerful voices in the movement for racial justice. Their words echoed through the hall, reminding everyone that the fight for equality was far from over. At the summit, the twins met other young activists who shared similar stories of overcoming adversity. They exchanged ideas, built connections, and began discussing ways to collaborate on larger-scale initiatives. The conversations were inspiring, and the girls left the summit feeling more connected than ever to the global community fighting for justice. It was a reminder that while their story had started with one incident, it had grown into something much bigger, an interconnected web of indivi. Back home, the twins were more determined than ever to continue their advocacy. They began working with schools, offering mentorship to younger students who were passionate about making a difference. They shared their story not as victims, but as empowered individuals who had turned adversity into a tool for social change. It was a lesson they wanted to pass on: adversity didn't have to define you, it could fuel the fight for a better world. The twins knew they had a responsibility to keep this The twins' advocacy work continued to gain momentum, but it also brought its own set of challenges. They began to receive messages from people who were skeptical of their intentions, questioning whether they were using their story for personal gain. Despite the criticism, the girls stood firm in their beliefs. They had not embarked on this journey for fame or recognition, they had done so because they believed in the power of standing up for what was right. Their mission was bigger than themselves. As the twins' influence continued to grow, they received an invitation to appear on a popular talk show, where they were asked to discuss their journey and the importance of fighting against systemic discrimination. It was a huge opportunity to amplify their message to a broader audience. The girls, though nervous, were prepared. When they spoke, they didn't just share their personal experience, they used the platform to address the larger issue of racial inequality and the need for sustained change. The aftermath of their talk show appearance led to more partnerships with nonprofit organizations focused on racial justice. The twins began to work alongside experts in the field, offering their voice and perspective to help shape policies and initiatives aimed at dismantling systemic racism. Their work became more strategic, focusing on long-term solutions rather than quick fixes. They understood that true change required not only speaking out but also collaborating with others who had been Despite the progress they had made, the twins never forgot the emotional toll that their journey had taken on them. They began to speak more openly about the mental and emotional challenges they faced, both during the incident at the airport and throughout their advocacy. They wanted to show others that it was okay to struggle and that self-care was an essential part of the fight for justice. It wasn't just about marching in the streets or speaking at rallies, it was also about taking care of you. As they continued to push for change, the twins became aware of how deeply their actions had influenced not only their own lives but the lives of others. The movement they had started was no longer just about them, it was about a collective effort to make the world a better, more equitable place. They had become a catalyst for change, and while they knew there was still much work to be done, they were proud of the progress they had made. The road ahead would be long, but with each step they took, the twins' work had inspired a wave of activism that was spreading across various sectors. Schools, businesses, and even government agencies began re-evaluating their practices to ensure inclusivity and fairness. The girls were invited to speak at a national education conference, where they shared their story with educators, urging them to foster environments where all students, regardless of their background, felt seen and heard. Their message was simple: inclusion starts in the classroom, and One of the most fulfilling aspects of their advocacy was the work they did with young people. The twins started a scholarship program for minority students, helping them pursue careers in activism, social justice, and other areas where they could make a difference. It was a way for the sisters to give back, knowing that the next generation would carry the torch forward. As they met with scholarship recipients, the girls were overwhelmed with gratitude. These young minds were filled with passion. The airline industry, still reeling from the fallout of the twins' story, began implementing a series of new measures to prevent discrimination. They introduced anonymous complaint systems, stricter hiring practices, and more diverse leadership teams to ensure that their staff reflected the communities they served. The girls saw this as a victory, but they knew there was more work to be done. They had opened the door, but now it was up to the industry to prove that it could truly evolve. The twins were invited to a private dinner with influential leaders from various industries. It was an opportunity for them to connect with those in positions of power and discuss how they could collaborate to address systemic inequality. The conversation was eye-opening. The leaders acknowledged that while progress had been made, much more needed to be done. The girls, humble as ever, didn't shy away from speaking the truth. They reminded everyone that change didn't just come from the top, it's. As their father looked on, proud of everything his daughters had accomplished, he reminded them that this was only the beginning. Their influence had stretched far beyond what they could have imagined, but it was important to remember why they started: for fairness, for justice, and for a future where discrimination had no place. The twins knew the road ahead would be long, but their commitment to the cause was unwavering. They had faced adversity and turned it into something powerful. Now, as the twins' influence spread, they were invited to collaborate with other activists and organizations around the world. The sisters traveled to various countries, sharing their story and learning about the unique challenges faced by marginalized communities in different cultures. They were struck by how much common ground there was in the fight for equality. Regardless of location, people everywhere were struggling against systemic barriers. These global conversations enriched their perspective. One of the most powerful experiences during their global travels was a visit to a refugee camp, where they met families who had faced unimaginable hardships. Despite the adversity, these families remained resilient, their spirits unbroken. The twins spent hours speaking with them, learning about their experiences and sharing their own. It was a humbling experience that brought the sisters closer to the core of their activism. They realized that while their fight for equality was significant, in the U.S., the twins' advocacy continued to push for more systemic changes, particularly in the criminal justice system. They joined forces with leaders in the movement to reform policing and address racial disparities in sentencing. By amplifying the voices of those who had been affected by the system, they were able to shed light on the many ways in which race influenced legal outcomes. Their platform became a crucial tool in pushing for policy changes, from ending discriminatory practices through all the media appearances, the rallies, and the policy changes. The twins never lost sight of the reason they began their journey in the first place. They were not fighting for fame or attention, they were fighting for fairness and equality for everyone. They stayed focused on their mission, knowing that the real work came not from the spotlight but from the long hours spent organizing, educating, and strategizing with others. The twins had become the embodiment of the change they wanted. Back at home, the twins reflected on the incredible journey they had been on. What started as an incident at an airport had snowballed into a global movement that was changing the way people viewed racial inequality. They had faced countless obstacles along the way, but they had persevered because they believed in the power of their voices. The world had started to listen. As they continued their advocacy, the twins realized that no matter how far they had come, there was always more work to do. As the movement continued to grow, the twins realized that their story had transcended their own lives. It had become a symbol of the power of community and collective action. They began working closely with grassroots organizations, helping to amplify the voices of those who had long been silenced. Together, they fought for policies that addressed the root causes of inequality, from education to healthcare to employment. The twins knew that lasting change required more than just conversation. The twins' activism also began to inspire the next generation of leaders. Young people from all walks of life reached out to them, expressing how their story had motivated them to get involved in social justice work. The girls were moved by the passion and energy they saw in these young activists. They knew that the future of the movement depended on the youth, and they were committed to nurturing and supporting the next generation of changemakers. Whether it was through mentorship programs, int. One day, as they reflected on everything they had accomplished, the twins were invited to the White House for a meeting with key policymakers and civil rights leaders. It was an honor, but more importantly, it was an opportunity to push for the changes they knew were needed at the highest level of government. In the Oval Office, they spoke candidly about their experiences and outlined their vision for a more inclusive society. The president and other leaders listened attentively, acknowledging the journey the twins had embarked on was far from over, but as they looked back at how far they had come, they felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. Their story had touched millions of lives, sparking change in ways they never imagined. But they knew that the fight for equality and justice was ongoing. The world had changed, but it had not yet fully embraced the ideals of fairness and inclusion. As the twins stood side by side, ready to continue their work, they were more determined than ever.